Good morning, crime community. I'm here to continue to read out Edgar Allan Poe. This is called Eleonora. I am come of a race noted for vigor of fancy and ardor of passion. Men have called me mad, but the question is not yet settled whether madness is or is not the loftiest intelligence, whether much that is glorious, whether that is profound, does not spring from disease of thought, from moods of mind exalted at the expense of the general intellect. They whom dream by day of cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night, in their gray visions they obtain glimpses of eternity and thrill in waking to find that they have been upon the verge of the great secret. In snatches they learn something of the wisdom which is of good and more of the mere knowledge which is of evil. They penetrate, however, rudderless and compassionless into the vast ocean of the vast ineffable, and again, like the adventures of the Nubian geographer, aggressi sunt mare tenebrum quid in esso est exploratori. We will say then that I am mad. I grant at least that there are two distinct conditions of my mental existence, the condition of a lucid reason, not to be disputed and belonging to the memory of event forming the first epoch of my life, and the condition of the shadow and doubt, appertaining to the present and to the recollection of what constitutes the second great era of my being. Therefore, what I shall tell of the earlier period, believe, and what I may relate of the later time, give only such credit as may seem due, or doubt it altogether, if doubt, if ye cannot, then play into its riddle of Oedipus, to whom I loved in youth, and to whom I now pen calmly and distinctly these remembrances, was the sole daughter of the only sister of my mother, long departed. Eleonora was the name of my cousin. She had always dwelt together beneath the tropical sun in the valley of the many-colored grass. No unguided footstep ever came upon the vale, for it lay far away upon the range of the giant hills that hung beetling around about it, shuttling about the sunlight from its sweetest successes. No path was trodden in its vicinity, and to reach out our happy home there we needed to put forth with force the foliage of many thousands of forest trees, and of crushing to death the glories of many millions of fragrant flowers. This it was that we lived all alone, knowing nothing of the world without the valley, I and my cousin and her mother. From the dim regions beyond the mountains of the upper ends of our encircled domain, we crept out of a narrow and deep river, brighter than all save the eyes of Eleonora, and winding stealthily about in many, many courses, it passed away at length through a shadowy gorge among hills still dimmer than those whence it had issued. We called it the River of Silence, for there seemed to be a hushing influence in its flow. No murmur arose from its bed, so gently it wandered along, and the perfectly pebbles upon which we graced to gaze far down from its bosom stirred not at all, but lay in the motionless content, each of its own old station, shining on gloriously forever. The margin of the river and the many dazzling rivulets that guided through devious ways into its channel, as well as the spaces that extended from the margins way down into the depths of the streams until they reached the bed of pebbles at the bottom. These spots, not less than the whole surface of the valley, from the river of the mountains that girded it in, were carpeted all by a soft green grass, thick, short, and perfectly even, and vanilla perfumed, and so sprinkled throughout the year the yellow buttercup, the white daisy, the purple violet, and the ruby red asphodel, and in its exceeding beauty spoke to our hearts in loud tones of the love and the glory of God. And here and there, in grooves about this grass, like wilderness of dreams, sprang above fantastic trees whose tall, slender stems stood not upright, but slanted gracefully toward the light and peered into noonday into the center of the valley. Their bark was speckled with the vivid alternate splendor of ebony and silver, and was smoother than all save the cheeks of Eleonora, so that but the brilliant green of the hued leaves that spread from the summits in long tumultuous lines dowling from the zephyrs, one might have fancied the giant serpents of Syria doing homage to their sovereign, the sun. Hands in hand about the valley for 15 years roamed I and Eleonora, before loved entered within our hearts. It was one evening at the close of third lustrum of our life and the fourth of my own that we sat locked in each other's embrace beneath the serpent-like trees and looked down within the waters of the river of silence at our images wherein we spoke no words during the rest of the sweet day, and our words even upon the morrow were tremulous and few. We had drawn the god Eros from that wave, and now we felt that he had enkindled within us the fiery souls of our forefathers. The passions which we had for centuries distinguished our race came thronging with the fancies for which they had been equally noted, and together breathed a delicious bliss over the valley of many-colored grass. A change fell upon all things. Strange, brilliant flowers, staring shaped, burst out upon the trees where no flowers had been before. The tints of the green carpet deepened, and when, one by one, the white daisies shrank away, they sprang up in place of them, 10 by 10, of the ruby-red aphidil. The life arose in our paths, for the tall flamingo, hitherto unseen with our gay glorying birds, flaunted his scarlet plumage before us. The golden and silver fish haunted the river, out of the bosom of which issued little by little a murmur that swelled at length into a lulling melody more divine than that of the sharp of Elos, sweeter than the voices of Eleonora. And now, to a voluminous cloud, which we have long watched in the regions of Hesper, floated out thence, all gorgeous in crimson and gold, and settled in peace above us, sank day by day, lower and lower into its edges, rested upon the tops of the mountains, turning all their dimness into magnificence, and shutting us up as if forever within a magic prison house of grandeur and of glory. The loveliness of Eleonora was that of the seraphim, and she was the maiden artless and innocent as the brief life that she had led among the flowers. No guile disguised the fervor of love which animated her heart, and she examined with me its innermost recesses as we walked together in the valley of the many-colored grass, and discourse of the mighty changes that had lately been taking place wherein. At length, having spoken one day in tears of the last sad change which must befall humanity, she thenceforward dealt only upon this one sorrowful theme, interweaving it into all of our converse, as in the songs of the bird of Shiraz, and same images as found occurring again and again in every impressive variation of phrase. She had seen the finger of death was upon her bosom, and like the Epheron, she had made perfect in loveliness only to die. But the terrors of the grave to her lay solely in the consideration which she revealed to me one evening at twilight by the banks of the river of silence. She grieved to think that having entombed her in the valley of the many-colored grass, I would quit forever its happy recesses, transferring the love which now was so passionately her own to some maiden of the outer and everyday world. And then and there I grew myself hurriedly to the feet of Eleonora and offered up a vow to herself and to heaven, and I would never bind myself in marriage to any other daughter of earth, that I would in no manner prove recreant of her dear memory or in the memory of the devout affection with which she had blessed me. And I called the mighty ruler of the universe to witness the pious solemnity of my vow. Of the angels, and streamed of the holy perfume floated ever and ever above the valley. And at lone hours, when my heart beat heavily, and winds that bathed my brow came into my laden with soft sighs, and indistinct murmurs filled often the night air, and once, but only once, I was awakened from the slumber like a slumber of death, from the pressing of spiritual lips upon my own, but the void within my heart refused even thus to be filled. I longed for the love which had been before filled it to overflowing. At length the valley pained me through its memories of Eleonora. I left it forever in the vanities and the turbulent triumphs of the world. I found myself within a strange city where all things might have served to blot from the recollection of the sweet dreams I had dreamed so long in the valley of the many-colored grass. The pomps and pageantries of the stately court and the mad clangor of arms. There's always an emergency. And the radiant loveliness of women bewildered and intoxicated my brain, and as yet my soul had proved true in its vows, and the indications of the presence of Eleonora were still given me in the silent hours of the night. Suddenly these manifestations they seized, and the world grew dark before mine eyes, and I stood aghast in the burning thoughts which possessed at the terrible temptations which beset me. For there came from some far, far distant and unknown land into the gay court of the king I served, a maiden to whose beauty my whole recreant heart yielded at once, and whose footstool I bowed down without a struggle, in the most ardent of the most abject worship of love. What indeed was my passion for the young girl of the valley in comparison with the fever and delirium and the spirit-lifting ecstasy of the adoration of which I poured out my whole soul in tears at the feet of the ethereal Menegarde? Oh, bright was the seraph Emegarde, and in the knowledge that I had room for none other, of divine was the angel Emegard, and I was looked down into the depths of her memorial eyes, and thought only of them and of her. I wedded, nor dreaded the curse I had invoked, and its bitterness was not visited upon me. And once again in the silence of the night, but there came through my lattice the soft sighs which had forsaken me, and they modeled themselves into familiar and sweet voices, saying, "Sleep in peace, for the spirit of love reigneth and ruleth, and in taking to thy passionate heart her who is Emegarde, thou art absolved for reasons which shall be made known to thee in heaven. For thy vows unto Eleonora." That is the end of Eleonora. I would like to read one more poem by Emily Bronte. It's called Death. Death, that struck when I was most confiding in my certain faith of joy to be, strike again, time's withered branch dividing from the fresh root of eternity. Leaves upon time's branch were growing brightly, fill the sap and fill the silver dew. Birds beneath its shelter gathered nightly, daily round its flowers, and wild bees flew. Sorrows passed and plucked the golden blossom. Guilt stripped off the foliage of its pride, but within its parently kindly bosom flowered forever life's restoring tide. Little mourned I for the parted gladness, for the vacant nest and silent song. Hope was there and laughed me out of sadness, whispering, winter will no longer linger long. And behold, with tenfold increased blessing, spring adorned the beauty burdened spray, wind and rain and fervent heat caressing, lavish glory on the 2nd May. High it rose, no winged grief could sweep it, sin was scarce to distance with its shine, love of its own life had power to keep from all wrong, from every blight but thine. Cruel death, the young leaves drooped and languished, even gentle's air may still restore. No, the morning sunshine mocked my anguish. Time for me must never blossom, nevermore. Strike it down that others' brows may flourish, where that perished sappled used to be. Thus at last its moldering corpse will nourish that from which is sprung eternity. We will thank Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Bronte for their lessons today. If you like and enjoy anything I'm doing here, please like and subscribe, and have a nice day.